Johnson here, and in this exciting video I'm going to be bringing in both Adronis and RaYaR, as they're going to be speaking about a historical perspective of Maldek. Now in the past, Adronis has come through talking about a historical perspective of Mars, and he's also talked about Venus and the Venusians. And again, there's been a lot of requests throughout quite the last little while regarding a follow-up to do relating to Maldek. So for those of you who are not aware, Maldek was once the original 5th planet of our star system that is now the asteroid belt. And it once was the epicenter for a lot of humans, so to speak, human beings that existed within this star system hundreds of thousands or even, dare say, millions of years ago. So Adronis is going to be coming through as well as RaYaR, and through this channeling state he will be elaborating a little bit more pertaining to Maldek and more about its historical perspective from, again, the point of view of both Adronis and RaYaR. So I'll just be a moment now while I connect with Adronis' energy first, and then RaYaR will enter where appropriate. So here we go, and we will now begin. We are here at this time, and we bid you greetings, and thank you very much for the opportunity of this interaction today. I am Adronis of Sirius, sending love, appreciation, and gratitude to all who are tuning in to this particular transmission being brought forward through your internet collective consciousness. What we would like to ask each and every single one of you that is tuning in to this broadcast at this time is simply allow yourselves to get relaxed, get comfortable, and tune in to the vibrations of Sirius, so that you may synchronize, harmonize, and align to all the information that we have to share. Also understand that all of the information that we shall provide today is simply that of our perspective, our point of view. For all knowledge, all information, all creation itself resides within your very heart, being, and soul. We will associate this broadcast representing the energies also of our feminine counterpart, representing RaYaR, again at the approximate time to where it becomes vibrationally appropriate. We will speak now relating to the idea of that of which you would know as a historical perspective of the world once known as Maldek. The inception pertaining to the idea of your star system began with Maldek. Everything representing the idea of the inception of sub-races representing the bonding of 5 particular races contained within the genome at that time occurred upon the planet to which you would know as Maldek, representing certain forms of, shall we say, subservience pertaining to the original races, connecting together through the idea of the Pleiades, of Sirius, of Orion, of Arcturus, and of Lyra. These were to be the 5 that represented their orientation to work together in beginning a grand experiment, the transformation of the Lyran humanity genome, bringing itself together through the permission of the 5. And that through this being, of course, eventually, from what you would know of your planet as the 5th planet within your star system, in regards to its geometry, pertaining to its harmonic of alignment, representing the causality, representing the cyclic plan pertaining to this star system as it would emerge. Maldek will be the forefront of this. As you have 10 planets within your star system at that time, the form of the energies, the form of the life pertaining to Maldek would be the middle point, the balanced quotient between these 10 planets. The whole idea, representing to the idea of Maldek, was to be a world of unification, a union of prosperity in regards to the human dynamic, representing, shall we say, much of the earlier times in regards to, shall we say, Maldek's earlier history, representing its inception upon itself relating to the third density itself was to be a world of peace, a world of harmonious organization, a world to where humanity would convene, other races would convene, and that this would be the epicenter in regards to peace, love, unity, to function together and bringing itself in that harmony towards a beautiful cyclic plan that allowed other worlds to cooperate, to move into a union, a true cooperative presence representing consortium to many different civilizations, where mankind, where humanity, as you understand it, would be the key to allowing many different worlds that have been, shall we say, particularly in struggle, that have been together in conflict, to now come together through the example that Maldek was meant to serve as. However, based upon the idea that Maldek was, again, a cooperative experiment, working together with, again, the original 5, that then branched off into 10, that then branched off into 15, into 20, into 25, into 30, intervals of all these different sub-races, shall we say, that represent human experiments pertaining to, again, other particular beings that have been part of the sub-race genome, to, again, become a part of this planet, to explore this intergalactic exchange center, to which Earth would eventually become. Maldek became first. You would understand that Maldek was approximately what you would know as 4 to 5 times the size of planet Earth. That very much to Maldek's appearance was very much of your planet Earth, as she is now, very similar to what Mars was in regards to the earlier times before its destruction, very much similar to what Venus was before the times of her destruction. The whole idea is that, again, the first 4 planets, Venus, Earth, Mars, Maldek, were very much, shall we say, Earth-like. And so, again, Maldek contained enormous land masses, immense oceans of beauty, water so clear that you could see nearly to the bottom, even in orbit. It was, indeed, a pristine planet. There were no particular forms of what you would know as governmental factors in the earlier times of Maldek. All particular beings upon the planet that were representative of the original 5 sub-races lived together in a very strong indigenous harmony. They worked together in the form of natural telepathy, being able to develop much of the ancient structures that you would be familiar with upon your own planet, such as pyramids, such as temples, such as, again, testaments to the idea of shrines, to the idea of enormous statues that were miles high, paying homage to the idea of the original Lyran civilization that began with the feline and the Lyran, or shall we say, lion Lyran, in that way. Very similar to what you would know as lions, such as the Sphinx, but also representing that of tall humanoid lion statues that were several miles in height. Therefore, these statues themselves could be seen from low orbit quite clearly. These particular forms of temples and these shrines and these pyramids in that sense all corroborated themselves together in coordination to what you would know as the 17.5 degree latitude at that time. Again, Maldek, like many of your other planets, represented the cycle to where the pyramids, the other particular forms of sacred sites upon the planet, allowed the grid to transform, to align the planet in harmony, to create stability altogether, to allow initiation in regards to those anointed that would allow themselves to become Christed beings, leading the planet further in regards to that particular way of becoming ascended masters, as you would understand it, working together with guardianship to allow the inner Argatha, representing Maldek, to continue a pristine, beautiful, natural consistency of love, of joy, and of unification that Maldek represented. We allow a pause right now as we will bring forward RaYaR to continue with this transmission. One moment, please. Beloveds, we thank you once again for this transmission, as we shall continue with the information representing your original fifth planet of Maldek. That Maldek, of course, was a feminine world, that in regards to its own inceptions of what it represented was that of the harmonious feminine energy, the goddess of Lyra, representing again much of the lion and lioness beings, the feline humanoid that was the original archetype through many of the inceptions pertaining to the human race itself. Maldek was to be this stronghold. Maldek was to be this epicenter of peace and of love. And through many, many thousands upon thousands upon thousands of your orbits throughout Maldek, it continued this prosperity, being able to open itself up as a diplomatic epicenter planet to allow other civilizations to enjoy the oxygen-rich content that Maldek provided. Maldek was indeed a very unique planet, being able to share in the beauty of its splendor of vegetation, to where many different societies, civilizations came through the planet to embark upon the journey of what Maldek was able to offer them in service. That the vegetation on Maldek was very similar to the enrichment of vegetation that you find upon your planet Earth today. That many other particular races that were very enthralled to the idea of associating in this way with the idea of unification would begin to genetically modify many different forms of fauna from their worlds to be placed upon the areas of Maldek in regards to experimentation. That much of Maldek's planetary consciousness welcomed in many different forms of flora and fauna from all across different corners of the galaxy. That many people, again, were presenting their love to the planet, sharing in this enrichment, in this beauty of the flora and the fauna. There were, again, many other different people, as it were, as you would understand it to be, star people in that way, that came upon the planet and really wanted to bring forward their own versions of what they consider Maldek to be. It was where many of these particular beings that, again, through much of the naivety of the Maldek civilizations upon that time, to allow many of these civilizations to start bringing in technological aspects to the Maldek civilization. That Maldek itself simply had something missing that represented the idea of the aspects of higher technology. It was very alien, as it were, pertaining to much of the original inhabitants pertaining to Maldek, very similar to what you would know as different, shall we say, species pertaining to that of the Sasquatch race. For these particular races themselves were very intelligent. For these particular races themselves were the caretakers of the land, very informative, although existing within a second density animalistic body. They held very strongly a sentient ego-based consciousness, and that they were considered to be much of the original inhabitants of the Maldek planet, being able to share much in regards to their love for the land, their knowledge pertaining to their communication with the natural planet of Maldek, to be shared with human presence, human beings of all different types from all over the galaxy. However, these particular beings that represented the idea of what you would know as the Nibiru Council, from what you would know as other beings existing within Butes, that also exist within other alliances contained within the constellation of Orion, began to take place upon the planet, colonizing their own formats, representing living conditions, representing these technological colonies, and began to industrialize much more of the planet in regards to their own familiar technologies that had been available throughout many of their own worlds that have now come upon Maldek. Again, throughout the naivety of much of the presence upon Maldek, this was seen as simply invitation in regards to attempting to discover another facet of technology, attempting to understand a technology that was more industrialized, that was more together in the form of working together with power sources, working together with higher technologies of transport, etc. So this was welcomed with no feeling of any particular deception, as it were, in mind, as it was very much an alien concept at that time. Yet the feminine energy still reigned strong, and that many of the beginning times representing this takeover, in regards to the industrialized technological aspect of Maldek, approximately 1.3 million years ago in your current terms of counting, took place. Again, the whole idea is that the planet itself was simply looking to associate with many different forms of life. Expressions were welcome. It was a free will world. We will now adjust our calibration and return back into the energies of Adronis as the transmission continues. One moment, please. We thank you once again, and we will continue with the transmission. That yes, the whole idea representing the idea of the technological aspect of Maldek was all based upon the idea of living conditioning, looking into the idea about how the resources of the planet could be tapped into, how it could be made to improve life for the better. That it was no longer the idea of what many civilizations consider to be the archaic way of living, representing the idea of natural indigenous culture. It was more so in the idea that this technological takeover in that way, on a very, very hush-hush, whisper, quiet level, was now starting to be much more amplified in many of the years to come. And that through the idea of the passing of several thousands of years, Maldek was now becoming a technological planet, with many different forms of transformations taking place upon the planet representing polarity. That those who felt that they were utilizing the technology so prominently began to tinker with their own states of emotional practices. And that this represented the idea of polarity shifting. The idea of greed was now starting to become very, very well known upon the planet. And many of these particular forms of alliances existing within your binary star of Nibiru, representing that of the constellation of Butes, representing that of the constellation of Orion, began to work together in many of these different forms of, shall we say, genetic tinkering that represented other particular forms of Homo sapienoid races that started to exist upon the planet, that began more of a control-based grid representing this world, and that their entire intention was to make the entire planet of Maldek completely and totally industrially technological, and that those that would not, in that say, get with the program were considered to be obstacles representing the idea of this mechanized intention. And so again, much to the nature itself was basically being trampled over through the idea of technological prowess, looking into the idea that everything needed to be ran through the idea of technology. This eventually migrated into the idea of creating war-based devices through the idea of advanced weaponry. This was again becoming very, very unsettling to much of the natural settlers, the natural colonists from many different worlds that came upon Maldek for a state of unification. It was starting to go a little too far. And so there was attempted negotiation attempting to take place here, representing the idea of this technological amplification. In regard to the idea of negotiation came misunderstanding. And through the misunderstanding, many of the technological creator races took this in what you would consider to be a way of threat to their own authority. This was basically representing the idea that Maldek was preeminent in becoming part of its First World War. The idea in that sense of much of the seizing of particular civilizations of many different cultures, representing again certain colonies and other indigenous factors, were basically placed into two particular choices: enslavement or extermination. And so Maldek itself began to develop itself completely out of control due to the fact of naivety. It was the true naivety in regards to many of the civilizations that orchestrated this experiment to feel that anything could go, that Maldek started to slip away into the hands of corruption, representing the overcomplacency and dependability upon technology. And through the givers of technology saw themselves to be creator gods. And this, again, completely jeopardized much of the original experiment upon Maldek. Other civilizations decided to leave Maldek. Others, in that sense, decided to retaliate. And again, more polarized situations representing Maldek was born. This eventually led to, shall we say, a star system-wide war, representing the idea that Maldek wanted to flex its dominant muscle, as it were, pertaining to technology. Either being able to take over other particular worlds contained within this star system, or in that way, bringing them to their knees. And this is often what has created itself to be the result of your star system in regards to the integrity of many of the planets today, representing the idea of Venus, representing the idea of Mars, representing the idea of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. That these particular planets, in that sense, were the result of ravishing wars, representing the idea that many of these particular planets that were capable of sustaining life as gaseous giants were basically rendered uninhabitable in regards to much of the Maldek order, as we will put it. This often represented the idea of what you would consider to be the fall of the Luciferian energy, representing that of the original light bearer, to where much of the Luciferian energy of the light barrier now started to sink, now started to become the fall of that particular cycle within your time. Maldek again continued to be enriched with war. There were many different civilizations that were very adamant in removing these particular technological controllers off the planet and being able to resume the form of its original intention as a welcoming, loving planet of unification. Again, the naivety got so far out of control that the polarities themselves started to shift so intensely that the nuclear war that occurred upon the planet encased itself in the idea of its own destruction. It was through the result of an internal core explosion that caused Maldek to shatter apart into what you would consider to be many small fragments of pieces, that through Maldek and its 5 moons were completely shattered through what you would know as a sound vibratory harmonic, representing the implosion of the planet's core that represented the idea of an explosion internally throughout the planet, echoing itself out through all of its 5 moons, shattering them together like a sonic boom, a sound wave altogether, causing this immense form of asteroid belt that you would understand now today to be all that remains in regards to that of Maldek. It was through the process of an internal war, through the process of what you would know as many different forms of sound weaponry, crystal weaponry, actually being tapped from the center core of the planet, to where too much of this energy was being sanctioned into technology itself, to where the core of the planet itself became completely unstable. Through this instability created a chain reaction that encompassed the entire planet, combusting itself from the inside and completely causing this external explosion, wiping out its 5 satellites. This again represents the idea that very few survivors actually were able to migrate from the planet before this foreseen destruction, for it was foreseen by many of the ascended masters, by many of the guardians upon this planet, that Maldek itself would fall, and that much in regards to an intended human experiment was telling us that it was still premature at this point to actually allow a type of humanity to still be conveyed together in harmony, as there has been, shall we say, a very large, long amount of galactic war that is still representing the idea of recovery at that time. However, the persistence continued, and from Maldek came Mars. Upon Mars's destruction, again sifted to Earth, and here you are now, today, representing all of the particular forms of genetic material of the original 5 that eventually became that of which you would know as the 22, to which you are now the 23rd, representing the 22 voluntary races that contributed to Maldek, that contributed to Mars, and that contributed to Earth. And now here you are, as the children of Maldek, or in that way, the grandchildren of Maldek. This is the whole key about being able to understand that much in regards to your solar system in times past had represented the idea that polarity was very, very alien to the idea of how other cultures naturally existing upon these planets that were brought here through geoengineering and through transit were in that sense attempting to understand deception. It was not understood. It could not be conceived, representing the idea of corruption, representing the idea of polarity, representing the idea of this worldwide war. Your star system has encountered over 500,000 years pertaining to the idea of conflict. And now it is all about the time to bringing those particular cycles to a conclusion. It is now time for your star system to return back into its truest design, representing that of a personalized galaxy of unification, of love, of harmony, to where all humanity can align together on your planet. Why do you believe that there are so many different human cultures upon your planet? Because this was part of the mirror effect for what has taken place on Mars and what has taken place upon Maldek. All the intention to bring forward the idea of unified humanity, to live together on one planet in peace, and to why there has been so much chaos upon your planet relating to the idea of certain forms of racial prejudice in this way has been all part in regards to what has happened upon Mars and upon Maldek in regards to its, what you would know as prior times before its destruction. So, Earth itself will be the planet that will represent a harmony in regards to these 500,000 years of war upon this star system. Bring it back into unification. You have already crossed that threshold. But we ask you now to connect to the asteroid belt that was once known as Maldek, that was once known as Malona, that once was known as Lucifer, and bringing that energy of harmony in regards to its original inception of unity to come together in your hearts. For many of you that are tuning into this broadcast right now were once a part of the Maldek civilization, were once a part of many of the cultures that were widely spread out throughout this beautiful planet known as Maldek, and that you have all in certain ways remembered much of its history through the history of yourselves. And so we would like to take a moment of silence to honor the energies of Maldek in regards to its original inception as a unified world, to unite humanity in ways that would bring the galaxy into a higher degree of balance, representing all human life. Let us have a moment of silence for the energies of Maldek. We thank you once again for the opportunity of this most wonderful broadcast with all of you who are tuning in to the transmission this evening of your time, to where this evening is present. Our unconditional love, appreciation, and gratitude to all of you, many of you, descendants of the Maldekian cultures, of the Martian cultures, of the Venusian cultures, of cultures existing across other different star systems, across many different constellations throughout this galaxy and galaxies abroad. For we are one family, for we are one united together, and that will be returning as humanity expands itself back into its remembrance and returning back into a unified, harmonized, loving human culture. I am Adronis of Sirius. Thank you again. Farewell for this timing, and we now return to the conduit. On behalf of myself, Adronis and RaYaR, we thank you again. And we will speak to you again in the infinite moment of now. Goodbye.